Welcome to the Unlist, guys. Today I have a different sort of video for you. This is a subject I've covered before at much greater length on my Instagram via one of my old live streams. And I call this little tale the tale of two Lauders. Both of these fragrances are made by Estee Lauder. Both of them are men's fragrances, and for the most part, both of them have the same bottle. The key difference is one is made in 1985 and the other is made in 2004. And one is a classic, sophisticated, signature-worthy men's fragrance that I think every guy should at some point smell in their life. And the other fragrance is probably the cringiest, most embarrassing thing I have in my collection, but only because of who it's named after and the packaging. Otherwise, the juice inside is pretty legit, in my opinion. I wish it was actually in a different bottle with a different name on it, so I wouldn't have to dance around it whenever I wear it. And people ask me, what are you wearing? It smells great. Oh, I'm wearing like that. So I don't want to say what it is. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first of these two Lauders is Lauder for Men by Estee Lauder, released in 1985. Perfumer is Nicholas Calderon here. The second one is none other than the infamous, Donald Trump, the fragrance, released in 2004 and created by perfumer Anne Byzantine. Now, I will say that Anne Byzantine, and I believe Raymond Matz was also involved, so there's two perfumers, Anne Byzantine, Raymond Matz. This fragrance was never intended to actually be this fragrance. So the fact that it exists as this fragrance kind of does it a bit of injustice, in my opinion. It would have been better marketed as something else. But this fragrance was originally created as a submission to a brief and was not picked. Another fragrance was picked for that brief. What that brief is subject to some controversy. There aren't really any authoritative information sources to say, yes, it was going to be this fragrance. So there's only supposition, and I'll get to that in a second. But this was sort of a B-lister formula that was thrown in this bottle and then, given this unfortunate name. About the name, my guess is that Donald Trump was probably watching Spaceballs one night from his Trump Tower or something. And he was watching Spaceballs, and he got to the part in the movie where Yogurt, played by Mel Brooks, opened up the little shop and was like, yeah, merchandising. It's all about merchandising. You got Spaceballs, a breakfast cereal. You got Spaceballs, a flamethrower. The kids really love this one. And that's when he had an epiphany. He was like, hey, Spaceballs the fragrance. I mean, Donald Trump the fragrance. That's it. That's our angle. And that's how you get literally Donald Trump the fragrance. He's like, hey, I'm a fragrance. Just kind of like that. And there it is. Now, before we talk about that little goblin over there in the corner, let's talk about this fragrance first, because I love this fragrance. It's amazing. And I would suggest, actually, those of you who might otherwise not be inclined to wear an 80s fragrance on a hot day, to make an exception and wear this fragrance on a hot day, because this fragrance takes on an entirely different life in high heat. And you would not think, by the way it smells, that it would be very suitable for high heat. But it's actually a fantastic summer scent. It opens up in a different way, and it is not cloying, and it's not overbearing at all. It takes on an entirely different, vivid, lucid character, even when you apply a little bit of like perspiration to it and some humidity. You crank it up. All right. So you wear this in the cold, it's fine. You wear this in the office, it's fine. But this fragrance is sort of a low-key kind of, what do they call cars? Sleepers. Yeah, this is like a sleeper of a summer scent right here, this fragrance is. Because you would never think that an 80s powerhouse would be suitable for hot weather. I mean, you wouldn't wear Koros in the heat, would you? Right? No, but you can wear this one. So trust me on that. Now, this fragrance came about in 1985 because Estee Lauder was breaking down barriers, okay? For the longest time, Estee Lauder had sort of bifurcated itself. You had Estee Lauder proper over here, which did all the makeup, all the high-end cosmetics, and all the perfumes for women, Azure, Private Collection, Youth Dew, Alliage, shall I go on? So, meanwhile, back in Gotham City, I think Alliage might have been a Clinique fragrance. I mean, I think I don't quote me on that one. That one might not be a Lauder fragrance, but they at least had Azure, Private Collection, Youth Dew, and Estee. Estee was another one. They were all properly Estee Lauder fragrances. Now, on the other side of things, you had their divisions. Their divisions were very specific. So in 1965, they opened the Aramis division that was just exclusively men's products, because by the mid-60s, men had an increasing interest in fragrances, grooming, and cosmetics. They were using things like skin bronzers, okay? They were using hair tonics, a lot of shave products. The time was now to start giving guys some higher end options, you know, because people like Avon had already jumped on the boat with exclusive men's ranges, all right? So it was about time that Estee Lauder did too. They didn't want to be left out of that, you know, money on the table, as they say. So in 65, Aramis came into being, and then Clinique came into being at the tail end of the 60s, into 1970, as a more skincare focused brand. Not so much cosmetics, but skincare. And they had fragrances too, and those fragrances were more spa oriented. They were more botanical in nature, to try and bring home that point of this is good for you, right? So Aromatics Elixir, for example, you know, didn't have a name that sounded beautiful or sounded resplendent. It had a name that sounded like it was something that'd be good for you all. Aromatics Elixir, that's fantastic. It's great for your skin, right? It smells good. I don't know how good for your skin it is, but it smells good. So, however, by the 80s, all of that was, you know, yesterday's news. You had Clinique launching a man's fragrance in 84 called, it was called Tailoring, Clinique Tailoring for Men in 84. You also had Aramis releasing women's fragrances. You had Tuscany per Donna, the women's counterpart to Tuscany per Uomo. So it only made sense, with all the barriers being broken down, that Lauder would come out with a proper fragrance, and they basically made it an eponymous fragrance by calling it Lauder for Men. Nicolas Calderon, more or less, merged a sheep with a fougere here. This is about 80% sheep, though, and only 20% fougere. People call this fougere, and I don't get where they can walk away thinking fougere, because this is very, very, very much a sheep. The only thing separating this fragrance from Private Collection or Azure are a few key changes in the heart notes. You know, the lavender, the geranium, the carnation are all very dandy notes that typically are found more in men's fragrances. But the rest of this fragrance is very much a green, aromatic, citrus, floral sheep, very much like a Charlie, very much like a Givenchy Etoile, very much like Private Collection even. Azure, okay? This is one of those fragrances. You get the bergamot, okay? You get the lactonic notes up top. You get a very stiff galbanum. You've got to like galbanum here. If you don't like green notes, you will not like this fragrance. You get rose, okay? Very beautiful rose in here. You get patchouli. You get oak moss. You get all of that lovely cistus goodness that comprises a proper sheep in the base. And a little twang, just a twang of animalic. This is still a clean fragrance, but it's a clean fragrance with a naughty wink in its eye. It kind of goes like that at you, but it's still clean. You can still wear it to the office. Very famously, this fragrance was first modeled by Kyle MacLachlan. Those of you who don't know who Kyle MacLachlan is, he played in a lot of David Lynch things back in the 80s and 90s. So he was in Dune, he was in Blue Velvet, and he was in Twin Peaks as Agent Dale Cooper. So great taste in coffee, Mr. Cooper, and cherry pie. Also great taste in fragrance, you know? You go to the Black Lodge smelling like this, you may not be talking backwards for very long, right? And dancing with a midget. Okay, so moving on to Donald Trump, the fragrance. Dun, dun, dun. It's Spaceballs. Spaceball 1. You know, here it comes. And it's like, it's going to plaid. We've reached ludicrous speed, you know, with this scent here. Anyway, by the early 2000s, Donald Trump had gone from a very successful real estate mogul who had dropped hundreds of millions of dollars building an effigy in downtown New York, which was the Trump Tower, to his own resplendence, I guess. He had gone from that high point in life to being the brunt of jokes in the business world, having all these failed business ventures, including mail order flash frozen steaks. Okay, he had a spa resort. He had failed men's apparel line, even all this stuff. He was like Richard Branson if Richard Branson was stupid. Okay, so all the Virgin branded stuff, but all terrible. Okay, so say what you will about Virgin Cola, the rest of those things were pretty cool. So he was like a dumb Richard Branson, and that leads us to 2004 when he decided to launch his TV show called The Apprentice, which basically means a failed laughingstock businessman that has no business giving you business advice. Don't say that 3 times fast. Sitting like this, watching people try and do things according to his business acumen and then all failing. And then he fires them all summarily one by one. You're fired. You're fired. Get out of here. Okay. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You couldn't pull your eyes away from it. So the show did very well. And to coincide with the launch of that show, he had this fragrance. Now, why it's in this bottle? I've got a couple guesses. This is all deep Google stuff you can dig up. You won't find much verified information though, so you got to take everything with a grain of salt, I'm about to tell you. But this bottle, which is in essence this bottle, looks very much like the Trump Tower. And if you live in Europe, or you've never spent much time in downtown New York City, you're from California or something, and you've only seen New York on TV and pictures, you may not be familiar with the Trump Tower. It's not the Statue of Liberty, right? Okay, it's not the Brooklyn Bridge. It's not a massive landmark, but the Trump Tower very much looks like this. So when Estee Lauder put this bottle out in '85, the Trump Tower had only been open for 2 years. It opened in '83. Okay, so chances are Donald Trump saw this bottle and said, "Oh, okay, so you're going to make that look like my building, huh? Well, I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to ask you for royalties, but when the time comes, I'm going to ask you a favor." And that was probably okay, because all those business moguls in and around New York, Helena Rubinstein, of course, Charles Revson, those were all the cosmetic folks, Estee Lauder, Elizabeth Arden, all the cosmetic folks. And then, of course, the businessmen on the other side, people like Donald Trump. I'm sure they all had lunch together. They all knew each other, okay? That's how that cronyism stuff works. So it's I scratch your back, you scratch my back. So I'm going to let you have this bottle, but down the road, I'm going to ask you a favor in exchange. Sure, whatever you say, it's fine, okay? And there's also a very high probability that he actually wore this fragrance himself, because a lot of New York folks like to support other New York businesses. They like to keep everything all in the family, right? It's kind of how it is over there. So he probably wore this and had fond memories of it. So when the time came to launch his own cosmetic range and his own perfumes to coincide with the show, The Apprentice, he reached out to Estee Lauder and said, "Hey, remember that bottle I let you use? Remember that Lauder for Men? I love that stuff. I wore it for 10 years. It was my favorite fragrance. Well, I want that bottle. Can you give me that bottle? And I want something in that bottle. Can you do that for me?" Okay. And they're like, "Sure, okay, whatever. It's no sweat. It's whatever." Because remember, at that time, he had no political career. He wasn't, allied with whack jobs with guns that want to mow down people in synagogues. He wasn't associated with all that crazy stuff. He was just a weird, washed-up businessman with a reality show. He was one of those surreal life types, like Vanilla Ice, right? Sort of like that. Okay, that's how people saw him back in 2004. So sure, okay, we can make some money here. No big deal. So what they did, according to what I've read, is they tapped one of their unused B-list formulas. Now, I've got conflicting information, so I will give you all of it, and you can figure out which one you think is correct. So I've heard that this fragrance, this Donald Trump for Men fragrance, was either an unused mod for a Tommy Hilfiger fragrance, or was an unused mod for a summer or sport version of this fragrance, which would make sense because of the bottle, So it was either an unused Tommy Hilfiger fragrance, because Tommy Hilfiger was made by Estee Lauder, okay? It was an unused Lauder for Men flanker that just didn't get released. Or it was an unused formula for Aramis New West, which was a brief that, Harry Fremont won that brief. So Aramis New West is a Harry Fremont fragrance from '88, I believe. Or it was an unused mod for Beyond Paradise by Estee Lauder. So the perfumer is Anne Byzantine, and she is also given co-credit with Raymond Matz. So Raymond Matz and Anne Byzantine are credited for making this Donald Trump the fragrance. And when you smell this, it does sort of smell like it could be any of those potential unused versions of those fragrances. It does smell like it could have been a more modern, updated sport or summer version of Lauder for Men. I'm not saying it smells anywhere near as good, okay? Do not get it twisted. I'm not comparing this in quality to Lauder for Men. I'm just saying you can get the neighborhood and go, okay, yeah, I could see this was maybe going to be a summer freshy version of Lauder, which is already a fresh fragrance in my opinion. Like I said, wear it in summertime, wear the shit out of it in summer. It's great. But this is a little bit lighter, a little more sprightly, a little fresher, a little more modern, but it has a lot of the same characteristics. It's very similar to New West. So I believe it could very well have been an unused New West formula. Harry Fremont and Byzantine, he won, she lost. Okay? Formula goes in the vault because it's still paid for as part of that development process. So we'll just stick it in the vault, maybe use it later. Tommy, no, because Anne Byzantine already made Tommy Hilfiger. She was already there with Alberto Morillas. Her and Alberto Morillas hooked up, and they did Tommy Hilfiger. So I don't think she would double dip there. It doesn't make sense, okay? Aramis, no, because Aramis was not really about this kind of style. Aramis is the whole gentlemanly pinstripe suit. New West was originally not an Aramis product. It was just New West. It became an Aramis product later on. So, And then, of course, the last one is that Beyond Paradise. Maybe. I mean, this is an aquatic fragrance. Beyond Paradise is also an aquatic fragrance. But Beyond Paradise is just like leagues beyond this in terms of artistry and abstract futurism. Like, this is 2004, where it belongs. Beyond Paradise is like the year 3050 or something. It's like the Conan O'Brien, in the year 3000, like that what they're going through. In the year 3000, and they got the white collars around their heads and stuff. That's what Beyond Paradise is. It's just like it's in another millennium. It's not even in the same time period that we're living in. It's a fragrance that was put in a DeLorean and sent back to the future. So, I don't know. My hunch is that this was probably a competitor for something in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, it does smell very polo blue, okay? This does smell like it could have been a polo blue pairable. So if I were to really venture a guess, it was a product that was made for Estee Lauder to fire back at Ralph Lauren, but they didn't have a brand to put this fragrance in. It didn't have a home, so it just sat. And then, of course, when Donald Trump comes along, he's like, yeah, I want a fragrance, and I want it to have my name on it, and I want it to sit in the bottle that looks like my tower that you guys used 20 years ago, and I let you get away with it, so now I'm coming back. And you're like, okay, Donald, shut up. Just shut up. Here you go. Here's your fragrance. Leave us alone. And that's where this comes from. Now, the hilarious thing about this is the advertisements for this fragrance had Donald Trump sitting there with, I guess, Ivanka, whoever he was dating at the time. And it had him saying that this is the best money can buy, the finest fragrance the money can buy. That's my Donald Trump impression for you. I'm not really good at impersonating angry oranges. Angry oranges are not my forte, but I'm trying here. Best fragrance money can buy. And then, it smells like money. The fragrance smells like money. Does it smell like money? No, I don't think it does. I mean, a little bit. I mean, okay, so what's weird about this fragrance, the reason why I'm actually willing to have it in my collection and not like burn it, right, is that this fragrance does smell like someone tried to take an aquatic and make it into a chypre. So you've got the sheep base, you've got that, like how New West has that base, the sandalwood and the herbs and the labdanum underneath the aquatic stuff. So you get aquatic stuff in the opening, and then it moves into the more herbal stuff in the base. That's why New West is a good fragrance. You know, this does a similar trick where you get the watermelon ketone in the opening, you get that bright aquatic lift, but then it very quickly gets green. So there is gallbladum in this fragrance, there is Peru balsam in this fragrance, and there's patchouli and a heck of a lot of clary sage. There's a big, massive, fat dunk of clary sage in this. So you get into the base, and if you squint really tightly, you can sort of see crisp new $1 bills, not hundreds, but crisp new $1 bills, a little bit, maybe a little bit. So I will give him that, possibly. And there you have it, guys. That is the tale of two Lauders. This fragrance got discontinued after only a couple years because Lauder discovered that most of Donald Trump's fan base shopped at Walmart. So they had to stick the fragrance in Walmart to sell it and mark it down to like $40. You know, in 2004, $40 is, you know, that was like the sitting price for, like, you know, most of your Walmart kind of brands, you know, your celebrity fragrances like your Tim McGraw stuff, set around $40 back then. So this lowered the brand cachet severely of Estee Lauder. Doesn't sell their stuff in Walmart. So they had to sell it in Walmart to get rid of it, because that sort of trailer park mentality was kind of that's who followed Trump. And when he became a politician, right, that's the same crowd that continued to follow Donald Trump, right? So there you go. Kind of speaks for itself there. So they very quietly pulled out. You know, they're like, no, we're not going to do anything else for you. So then he just took his fragrance business. He stayed partnered with IFF out of New York, but took his business distribution-wise to Parlux. And, you know, Parlux is like, back then, Parlux was known for celebrity stuff. They did all the stuff for Jay-Z, all the stuff for Sean John, did all the stuff for Rockaware, you know, everything but like the Tim McGraw was Cody, but they did all the celebrity brands. Britney Spears, that was all Parlux. So Donald Trump just went with the obvious choice of Parlux. So this is the only Estee Lauder fragrance that has his name on it. And it's the only fragrance with his name on it that I'm willing to have in my collection, because all the other crap is crap, okay? So this little guy I bought almost 20 years ago. And you can see how much I've worn it, you know, in 20 years, right? Not very much. So it's just one that's kind of sat around. And I actually owned this before I knew about this. So imagine my surprise once I became more active in the online fragrance community, right? Imagine my surprise when I discovered this from 1985. And this is what I thought this bottle was. Oh, it's the Trump Tower, look at it, you know? No, this came first. Mind blown. Far superior fragrance, far superior fragrance. Good fragrance, tragic brand association, tragic name, but the juice inside, like I said, coming back full circle, decent stuff, if you can just get over yourself. And since it's discontinued now, you know, if you were to track this down and buy it, you're not paying anybody related to Donald Trump. You're buying this from someone else who, like myself, bought this years ago. So like eBay, this is an eBay purchase for sure. So it doesn't cost very much, because people who are trying to sell this realize they're probably not going to sell it unless they give it away. So you'll get it for an okay price. That's it, guys. The Tale of Two Lauders. Hope you learned something. Have a good 4th of July weekend, or whenever this goes up, it may go up after the weekend. So if 4th of July is come and gone, then hope you had a good one. See you later.